Hi, Yvette.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello,
You.
welcome.
Yes. So, Yvette, welcome to the Ottawa Black Book Club. I know I had chatted with you briefly before. I see a fan in your background. I think I have mine here.
Yeah, it's so hot these days.
Yeah. So these are some of us. And initially we're chatting about the book, and I'm happy that you are here at least to answer questions. So we've already read your bio, so I just want to jump straight into the gist about the book.
Yeah.
So I told them that my favorite portion of the book, one of my favorite stories here is Plum Tree. I liked the collection and how those stories were, straight to the point. And I read out page 73. I said, when the daughter's breast bud, an uncle does what uncles do and reaches to pluck a flower before the bloom. It is dark. The government has cut the lights for 12 hours again, but white lights surround the uncle and flames erupt from his chest. 3 times someone tries to beat the flames with a blanket. 3 times the flame reignites. An autopsy is conducted. Cause of death, electrocution. Disease, probably put his finger in a light socket. There is an old lady in the forest who sells lightning by the bottle. And
Mm.
the note I put, the note I put there was fantastic. I wish life was like this, instant karma. So first of all, welcome again. And what was your inspiration for this collection?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited for our conversation. So, this short story collection started off when I was in my MFA program, when I was doing my master's. And I was actually working on a novel, right? And a novel is so difficult to write. I was so frustrated. It feels that writing a novel feels endless, right? And so I would cheat on my novel with writing a story a day. And by the time that I'd finished, I had a whole collection. I said, okay, I need to put these stories together. And all of these stories were born out of, my own frustrations with things that were happening back home in Zim. I came to the United States for my education, but I grew up and was raised in Zim, thinking about, what has happened to women, both in my family and just seeing everything outside, looking at the current state of politics. We have a dictatorship, lots of human rights abuses. So just all of those things, as well as my immigration process here to the United States. I have a story, I think it's the third story in the book, where it deals with, immigration and what it means to give up your home and come here and live, in the USA, which is not very welcoming to, people like us. So all of those things were kind of, things that I was thinking about and that were bottled up inside me, and I put them all in the book.
Okay. I don't know if we will have enough time to go, through each story. So I
Mm.
will just ask key questions from different stories. So like the first one, which is red cloth and white giraffe. You use the word here, ngozi. As a Nigerian, I'll call it ngozi. Ngozi means blessing. It's Igbo.
Ah,
In what language do you people speak? Is it in Bantu?
that's Shona. Yeah.
Okay. What does it mean in Shona?
Yeah, it means avenging spirit. That's so interesting that it's a blessing in
Yeah,
your language, but here it's an avenging spirit in Zim.
yeah.
I didn't
So
know that.
yeah, so I was looking at how you spoke about this is the first time I'm actually reading. No, this is the second time I'm reading about someone talking about the after her experience in the afterlife.
Mm,
And yeah, and here I was surprised that gender still came into play in the afterlife. A woman cannot proceed to the after without being whole.
mm,
So talk to us about moving on
mm.
the afterlife in terms of gender. Because the other woman she met, I think that one had lost her arm or so, and was
Right.
that she was incomplete and couldn't move on to the next on to the afterlife. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful question. With that story, I was thinking about the tradition of, bride price back home. We call it lobola. So when a woman gets married, they pay the bride price, which is very common in many, African cultures. But then, because some of these bride prices are very expensive, your husband cannot finish paying it off, right? They do it in installments, and sometimes the wife, passes away before the husband has finished paying the installments for the bride price. And what happens is that if your husband hasn't finished paying the bride price, your family cannot bury you until that is completed. And a lot of families are very strict about this. And what happens is that there's now infighting when a woman is dead. And I wanted to talk about that, even in death, there's still these, patriarchal practices where you can't even, get a dignified, quick, funeral if this bride price hasn't been paid. And I wanted to talk about that, as women, even in death, who has ownership over our bodies, right? That this money has to be paid, even, when you're no longer here.
Okay. All right. Then let me see. Let me go to second place is the first loser. So this story now, we're just talking about it. I was talking about it with Bukola. And it's interesting how many times as Africans we take for granted some of the treasures we have. Like
Yeah.
look at how because I think it's like when I meet people who speak my native dialect, and I go, oh, so do you speak Esan? Because that's my native. And they go, oh, I don't really speak it that well. So I didn't understand. And someone said to me, when they say I don't really speak my local dialect that well, it means they are posh.
Yeah.
How does that make you posh? Yeah. So I was reading now and seeing how everything African she really wasn't interested in. The
Yeah.
connection, the Soro Yematatu. I don't know why when I was thinking of this game, what was coming to mind was either a game we call Ayo.
Yeah.
I thought about Ayo. Yes.
Ayo too, right? Because like, yeah, I
Yeah.
kept thinking of Ayo. So we have a game called Ayo where you have two rows and you put seeds in different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar.
I know
Yeah.
you have it. Yeah.
I kept thinking about Ayo. And the way she would always dismiss, very dismissive. And then only for her to visit with Chad. And Chad was fascinated by some of these things. I didn't know that the idea for Lift came from Africa. Let me use the word Africa.
Yeah.
Why is she being bitter? See how interested Chad was in learning about the game, and he won. I noted that Chad won. That sentence, Chad won, for me was very, very significant. They're very poignant. Chad won. And then he went back home and became a millionaire with this idea. If she hadn't been so bitter, maybe they could have been some sort of partnership. And she wouldn't have been broke and had to go back home to start job hunting. Talk to us about that.
Right. Yeah, with that one, I wanted to talk about, a lot of the times we're very, ashamed of African ideas and African innovations. And Lyft started because, in Zim, we have, problems with transportation. And so people are very innovative. Whenever we have a problem, right, we come up with a solution. We have lifts. When there's, problem with money, people come up with, solutions. Every day there's a problem, we come up with very innovative solutions, but we're embarrassed by it. And then, when white people come and then they see this thing, they take back an idea that we're embarrassed about and they turn it into $1 billion company, right? So Lyft came before Uber. So the idea for Uber also stemmed from Lyft. And when Lyft was first founded, it was called Zimride. And he named it after Zimbabwe. That's why it was called Zimride when he first founded it. So I just found that so fascinating as a Zimbabwean, because the founder went to Cornell University, which is where I got a scholarship to go to that university. So finding out while I was there as a Zimbabwean that this idea had come from something, we do at home, and I didn't know. I was really fascinated by, why is it that we are so ashamed of our ideas that are very good ideas, that are answers to a lot of solutions. And that's what that story wants to critique. And that's why that character is, is so dismissive of everything. She's dismissive of the game. She's dismissive of Lyft. She's dismissive of her heritage, her language. Even what you were talking about earlier on, that if you don't speak your language, that means you're posh.
Of course,
Even
yeah.
in our education system, they punish you for speaking local languages. I remember, very frequently when I was in primary school, if you spoke your language in the classroom, you'd be punished. You'd get hit by the teacher.
Yeah.
So I wanted to critique all of these things, that we're getting punished for speaking our language as kids. That teaches you to be ashamed of your language, right? When you're a kid, every time you get punished for speaking your language, okay, this is a bad thing. So that's what I wanted to critique there, that we're ashamed of, ourselves, but, these are good ideas, these are innovations, and we need to see that, we have very good ideas, we have, very good cultures, and we should embrace that.
Yeah, because I remember in primary school then, if you you speak anything apart from the Queen's English, they will say you're speaking vernacular and then you'll be punished.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you'd be punished.
like
Yeah.
that. So you're speaking vernacular and then you'll be punished. Okay, Bukola just put that here. Yeah, because I'm just looking at this where Chad says, I think the last conversation they had, it's sad that you can't see the innovation in your own backyard.
Exactly.
And then she spat. You're just a culture vulture masquerading as a hippie. You are no better than the colonizer David Livingstone. And you know, when I got to David Livingstone's part, you know, I just laughed. I can't even remember. Let me see. Did I put a note there? I think I can't remember what I put there. But you know how they try to change the names of these things? The audacity.
And to
Audacity
even say you discovered it when people were living there, we've lived there for centuries. How
century.
can you say you discovered it?
Like me going to Rome and saying, wow, I just discovered the Vatican. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to how to become a thing with tongues. So initially when I started reading this, I wasn't too sure. I wasn't too sure what the story. I didn't get the story initially when I started to read. But then I think at the end, when she came out and forgot who Jabu was, it dawned on me that these are the things we lose when we migrate, take citizenship up in different countries. Sometimes it's possible to lose your culture. It's possible to lose memory. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that story came out of, frustration with my own, immigration process and thinking about all the things that I've given up to come and study in the USA, right? So you give up time with family. It's difficult to go back home, very frequently. Maybe go back for Christmas, or, a few times here and there. So you're losing time with family. You're losing, your language. You're losing parts of your culture the longer that you stay here. And so I wanted to capture, kind of like the violence of that, of having to give up so much for the safety of being, in the UK, the US, etc. So I used, magical realism and the surreal to capture that feeling of losing something. So you have a character losing their eyes, you have a character, losing their tongue, you have a character losing their memories, to capture how much of yourself is, taken when you move to these Western countries.
Yeah, because when she was talking to Jabu, I wasn't sure what she was going to lose. Because I was just hoping, because as a storyteller myself, I was hoping, I hope you're not going to lose your Ngona. I think that's what it's called. I think that's what you called it, Ngona. Yes, I hope you're not going to lose your story. And then she came out and he was talking to her and she didn't recognize him. And I went, no, not all the beautiful memories. No, not that. Yeah. Then, okay. So for those people who haven't read, I'm just trying to go through each story so you get a summary. Bukola, you've read the book before, so please, questions. Yeah, so I don't want to be the one monopolizing the conversation. So please, if you have
I
questions,
do have a question.
yes,
Um,
please.
my question is actually about the whole collection. Thank you, Yvette, for joining us. My question is about the whole collection, especially the one where you had the one that Louisa just read, the short part, even though it's not a complete story, but it could be a complete story. And then the one that's got the plum one that's got different stories. I can't help but be amazed about how you can tell a full story in 2 paragraphs. You can write something so short and we're not thinking, we get the whole story. So my question is, how do you is it just a gift that comes naturally to you, or do you edit it to that? So like where we read a story in the shortest possible form, like, you know is it because you've written it wider and then you compress it, almost like what you do for Twitter? Well, what I do, because I'll write something and I'm like, this is too long, then I have to remove and edit, you know is that what you do for your short stories, or you just know how to tell the story in a few words?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question. With that story in particular, I wanted to give little snapshots into different experiences that African women have. So, in that story, you have, um, women that are, experiencing the horrors of being a woman in this world. You have young children that are being, abused by uncles. You have all these different things happening. So I wanted to have, snapshots into different experiences that we have at different stages. So in each snapshot, there's a woman at different stages of her life. There's, a young woman who's experiencing a period for the first time. There's a young woman who's being forced to undergo, virginity testing. There's, a young woman who's about to be married. So it's women at different stages of their lives and looking at the challenges that they face, but using horror to show these challenges. So that's why I wanted to have quick snapshots so that you can kind of relate to it at every stage of that woman's life, right? Because you've been, a young girl before, you've, had your first period before you've, been, getting married, etc. All, being an older woman. So different stages where you can kind of enter the story at any moment and relate to it.
So when you write it, do you write it long and shorten it, or it just comes out like that? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, it depends on the story. For that story, because I wanted to separate it by age, that's why I had, the little snapshots of different women at various ages. With other different stories, sometimes I think of, a particular line. Sometimes I get stories from the news, right? There's always stuff going on, back in Zimbabwe. So, okay, if I find something interesting in the news, I'm like, okay, I want this to be a longer story. So it depends on each story.
Okay, thank you.
Ah, great question. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just looking at, so the two stories after this, the carnivorous lollipop and swimming with crocodiles. Oh, hold on. Let me let slide it in. So my summary of these stories are the things that have happened in Zimbabwe. Carnivorous lollipop. Here I was talking about. Here I was wondering what it was with feeding ants. And then before I realized what was going on with these companies that produce drugs and medication and stuff like that. And then the second one, swimming with crocodiles, was the sacrifices people will make for a better life. I didn't know that the Limpopo River was crocodile infested. I didn't know that until I read this. So talk to us about these two stories. That's the carnivorous lollipop and swimming with crocodiles.
Yeah, with the carnivals lollipop, I'm looking at, wealth disparities between the rich and the poor. Back home and in, a lot of African countries, there's, very stark differences in wealth. We have, politicians and leaders who, have, they fly out to the West, they've got these big cars while, they're driving on a road with potholes where people cannot get jobs. So I wanted to tap into that and see how ridiculous it is, these disparities between the very wealthy and the very poor back home, and using this company where they're kind of like a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme where you've got these ants, these carnivorous ants that they're feeding, and they're making this, this medication with these ants. And we have these, kind of scams and schemes, back home. There's always somebody selling you something that, oh, this will bring lost lovers back, or this will give you, a whole bunch of money. This will do this. So I wanted to play with that a little bit. Oh, I didn't catch that. Was that a question?
No. I just muted her. I think she was unmuted. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So with the ants, at the end of the story, not to spoil it, but they do end up, consuming the billionaire, attacking the billionaire. So I wanted the little people, to kind of have a win at the end, right? To kind of have a revolution where the small guys are taking on the big guys that have everything, and that's kind of why I ended that story that way.
Yeah, I love that when she picked up the box, she headed in the direction of the house of the billionaire, and I was like, yes. Yeah, because I wasn't really sure how it was going to end. And I like the fact that you tell these stories indirectly. So it's left for you to put two and two together and say, oh, this is what she's talking about. Okay, this is it. Okay. So the next story, Ugly Hamsters. So the connection there you made with the goddess of wealth. Because at the point I was asking myself, is this a blessing or a curse? I also, here where you said that Gogo had warned her about picking money from the floor. We have that thing too where they say, when you see money on the floor, don't pick it up. You might chicken, and somebody will come and pick the chicken and use it for sacrifice and all of that.
Yeah.
But in her own case, yes. So she picked it up, and then let me see. Performing the same end. Yeah. So she picked that money up, and then when she started making more money, when it started to multiply, I was happy that, okay, she was going to have a good, rich life. But it's
Yeah.
just really the immigrant experience where you start to feel guilty sometimes for being comfortable.
Right.
Yeah, because when she went to get that massage done, she started to remember, oh, people at home, this person needs this person needs that. And she started to take care of everybody until, when she said that she wonders if she should have stepped on that $5 bill that day. Okay, she was stressed up. But why did she have to die? Why did the God, was it to put her out of her misery? Because they said they watch a girl named Light driven mad by the goddess of wealth's favor. Why did she have to die? And what did she choose? Because when she got to the afterlife, she had those two opportunities to choose. She said, where is it? You've always been the good oldest daughter. I'm a first daughter too. So I thought of that. He said, you've always been the good oldest daughter, the creator says. No one will judge you for choosing rest. Light makes her choice, lifting her foot towards her eternity. And then Ndipo Pakazo Pereira Sarungano. This is where the storyteller ends. And I put a note here, which did she choose? So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So with that story, I want the reader to kind of choose for themselves, especially if you've been in a situation where, you're living abroad and you have to help everyone back home, right? And sometimes it's a lot. You can't help everybody. And, everybody's depending on you. So I wanted readers who are in that situation to kind of think of what would you do in that situation? Would you choose, rest? Or would you choose to continue working, forever like you did in life? And I'm very curious, for you, what would you do in that situation?
Rest. I think rest. I think I'm so blessed that I'm not in that situation. But I have
Yeah.
friends who are in that situation where they are the all and all. I remember saying to a friend of mine, you have become the cash cow of your family.
Yeah, exactly.
What you are doing is good, but your family does not see you as anything else but their cash cow.
Yeah.
So you have pushed yourself. You have pushed yourself. I remember her brother-in-law was going to get married and they kept reaching out to them, please, we need money for the wedding. We need money. And we thought that, yes, it was because they really needed money. Then when the wedding pictures came out, we realized that the bride and the groom changed outfits 6 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, is this the rubbish they use the money for?
Right.
Yeah, so I would have chosen rest. For those people who haven't read it, that's the story ends on page 60. Yeah, then my favorite part story collection is Plum Tree.
Mm.
This whole 2-hour conversation could have gone on just focused on this story, Plum Tree. So I also made a connection with Nigeria. So you started with Magun, where people fix people who sleep with other people's wives. We call it Magun in Nigeria. Where it's believed that if you go and have sex with someone else's wife, both of you get stuck. And this man, Tanaka, it was ants that he had coming out of his body. Yeah. So when I read that, I'm like, it's interesting how similar some of our stories are.
Yeah.
How similar. Then basket women. When you spoke about basket women here, in Nigeria too, we also talk about witches that fly. But if for us, they fly in granite shells. Yeah, they fly in granite shells. Yeah, that's why, because I come from Edo State. If you heard of the ancient Benin Kingdom, so my people are descendants from the ancient Benin. So around Christmas, you would find old women trapped on rooftops. How they got there, we don't know, and they are always naked.
Yeah.
They will tell you that they were flying and the fuel finished, and then they landed on the tree. So talk to us here about witchcraft, and superstition, and science.
Yeah.
Talk to us about it.
Yeah, it's exactly as you're saying, there are lots of stories, back home. Sometimes it even makes the front page news that, they found a naked woman in the middle of a market, at 2 p.m. What happened? She fell out of the sky. She fell out of a basket. So there are all these stories that we hear. And I'm, very fascinated by that, if these things are real, because we treat them like they're real, it's like, okay, she fell in the middle of the market. It's real. There were 50 people that witnessed, this woman falling in the middle of the afternoon. So, I was curious about that. I'm like, okay, if we have women that can fly, why don't we use this as an airline? If we have this magic, if we have this crazy magic, okay, why isn't Air Zimbabwe using, this this technology? So thinking of, these things that we call witchcraft, these things that we call, mysticism, are they a form of technology? And how interesting would it be if we had, Air Nigeria is the women, in the baskets, that would be very fascinating.
Yeah, because you said the Wright brothers, when I saw the Wright brothers were not the first to find flights. I smiled and I got curious. I was wondering, okay. And then you went, there are other histories, other sciences not recorded. But in this world, when something is not written down, it does not exist. And that is very true, and that's very sad. I was saying to someone that the fact that we didn't write down a lot of things doesn't mean that a lot of things didn't exist at that time. They were passed down through oral history, and then art. The art that we still have. I know that Europeans came, they destroyed a lot. But when you look at art, if you're able to read art, you will see some of the things that existed at a time. But because they are not written down, like you said here, it does not exist. But it's just, I think what still keeps getting me here is how very similar it is to Nigeria. Okay, let me go to Busheshe. I think the comedian, a small town who rose to national fame with her skits, and how a lot of people, and how the internet is a blessing, can be a blessing and a curse. Yeah. You start out small, then you start getting a lot of followers, and then you get intoxicated and you start to talk rubbish.
Yeah.
We know the kind of societies we are from. I mean, we see every bad thing, but like we say, we have a saying, it's not everything the eye sees that the mouth says, especially when you know the kind of society you are from.
Yeah.
And look at this one. And when it said the gunmen were swift, breaking into her house, blindfolding her, folding her, and shoving her into the back of an Isuzu. Neighbors saw the whole thing, but who can call the police when the gunmen are the police? And when after they tortured her and everything, and she came out to look for help when she was crying for help, of course, they thought she was a Muroyi, right? A witch.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that was how she lost her life. For nothing. Yeah. So my question here is, do you think the internet is more of a blessing or more of a curse?
Yeah, I think two things can be true at once. Like, it's a blessing, right? A lot of people have, gotten jobs. Their lives have changed from the internet, right? And even with, with my book, the way people are discovering this book is through the internet, right? People are recommending it, and you get to find out about the book, because of that. So I think the internet is both a blessing and a curse, because it can also go in the other direction, like what happened in the story. And I want to quickly talk about, the comedian in that story. It's actually based on a real person. There was a comedian in Zim. She was getting really famous. She was making a lot of this comedy about politics in Zim. And people, loved it because, for the first time, people are speaking openly about, what's going on the ground. But, the powers that be did not like that she was talking about politics, that she was making fun of politicians. So they kidnapped her and attacked her for 3 days. Luckily, she survived that attack and talked about her experience. But there are plenty of other, journalists, writers we've never heard from them again after they've been kidnapped. So I wanted to talk about that experience, that when you open your mouth back home about politics, this kind of thing happens.
Okay. And then the next one, orange and the egg, virginity testing. That's one question I've always asked. Virginity testing. Why is the virginity testing just for women and not for men? Because they will tell you for men, you don't have a way of knowing. But for all women, it's not always the same. So let me see. Bukola, let's see. Just a minute. Yeah, Delegiwa, that was when we first heard about the letter bomb. Yeah, the letter bomb. Delegiwa in Nigeria in the 80s was killed by the government. Yes, it was a letter. I still remember then. I was in primary school, the letter. Then Magun, like I said, when you talk about fixing, yeah, Bukola says, Magun in Yoruba translates as don't climb. Yeah. So virginity testing here, where they always talk, when you talk about virtue, I think virtue should apply to both parties, both genders. Yeah. It's not always about, look, that a woman is a virgin or that you marry a virgin doesn't guarantee that she's going to be the best wife or a good wife.
Right.
Yeah. So Yeah, so when I was reading about this, and oh, she's rewarded, the girl who passed the test, she's rewarded with an orange. When she leaves, she parades the fruits around the village for everyone to see. Bear witness to the fruits of my virtue, her wide smile says. Everyone must see the honor she has brought to her family. But people, it reminds me of university days when people became very innovative. Girls became very innovative. I don't know, Bukola, if you've ever heard of them talking about girls using alum and lime to wash down there. I don't know, Yvette, how it is in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. What is that? What do they do?
they use, so when you talk about virginity, right? You have girls who are sexually active in school. And
Yeah.
when they are going home or they are going to visit the boyfriend, they use a solution. You get water, you put, what's the English name for alum?
I'm not sure, you know.
What's the English name?
Check.
Yeah, I don't know. Please Google it for me. But they put some
Only to potassium, but I'll check. I'll check.
check, please. But we use, there's something we call alum. Some use lime, some use alum in water. So it makes the water acidic. And because down there, the tissue there is soft. So they wash down there with it because they believe it tightens it. Make you seem as if you are not. Oh, potash. Lola says potash. Yeah. So talk to us. What are your views on these virginity testing? Because for me, I just feel it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And one of the characters in that story games the test, right? She's not, pure as they
Right.
want her to be, so she finds a way to trick the test
Yeah.
and and survive. So I wanted to, to talk about that. But I think these purity tests are, are very ridiculous, and yeah, they shouldn't be a thing.
It doesn't make any sense. And I look at how women sometimes have to suffer for the sins of men when I read the Spirit Husband,
Yeah,
where that man killed somebody. I mean, he got drunk and
right.
killed someone. And why does his sister? I don't think we don't have that we don't have that in Nigerian culture. I've heard of something similar in Ghana, but we don't have this in Nigerian culture, where if you kill someone, they give a daughter from your family to go and be a wife in that family as atonement or replacement for the life that has been lost. No, we
Right.
don't have that. So my question there was, why do women have to suffer for this? Because I look at the two stories, then the story following it soft, where the man says that your hands should be hard, your knees dark, which shows that you are hardworking. It doesn't make any sense.
Right, right. That line that you just quoted actually happened to my cousin. She was dating a guy, and he said, "Oh, your hands are soft. That shows that you don't work. You're not going to be a good wife." And it's like, oh, and this was a young man saying this, right? So we're seeing this, this culture, this tradition of, women are supposed to have hard lives, carrying on to the young generation. Because this was a young couple dating, and he told her, or if you buy a washing machine for a woman, she'll be too spoiled.
But yeah,
Your hands are supposed to be hard if you're a woman to show that you're a good woman. So this stuff, is still happening to young people, to this day.
yeah,
Now,
which is
oh,
sad. Which is
yeah,
Yeah, because he says to buy a washing machine is to spoil a woman. He said she will forget her place.
right.
Of her hand, they walk in silence the rest of the way. What is her place? Because when I hear this word, you forget your place. Please, what is my place? Someone educate me so I know what the hell my place is.
I would love to know too.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, what is your place here? Then let me see. Okay, the next one is okay, no, Closed Casket. Yes, I've heard of that. For those who haven't read, Closed Casket is the story of how women try to check infidelity. Yeah, yeah, try to check infidelity. I think that's the best way That's the best way to explain this story. Because I was reading, I was just laughing. I was having a good laugh. I was having a good laugh. When he said, I will fix her, she says, I will fix her good. Jesus is too slow in intervening. So the wife turns to other vengeful gods. African gods who dispense wrath quicker than vending machines. The wife visits a Muroi, and the Muroi does what Barois are said to do. The vengeful gods are swift. As soon as the husband pulls out of the slay queen, her womanhood moves from his spot in between her legs to her forehead like a third eye. The man screams and runs away. scared of the thing he licked only moments ago. When I read that, it's still the same, like instant karma. But
Yeah.
but it's unfortunate that life is really not like that. But it's all just about pleasing men. Yeah, this one, Red Hot Chili Peppers, where you talk about the flow of blood. I think this is a girl's period. And the woman says, now that you are a woman, this is what happens if you open your legs. Why? The only time I heard of girls having Red Hot Chili Peppers put in their private areas is when a girl had been accused of immorality. That was done as punishment. So this woman now, her auntie now has put chili peppers in there and said to her, this is what happens when you open your legs. So it's interesting how where my mind went to was how when as a young girl you approach puberty, they tell you to stay away from boys. You go to high school, go to university, they tell you to stay away from boys. Then after you graduate, they ask you, where is your husband? So is the guy supposed to fall from the sky? That's my question. But it broke me when you ended it and said, across the ocean in Nepal, girls with blood are forbidden from sleeping in the house. So a shed akin to a dog's kennel is built for them outside. Sometimes in the winter, the girls are dragged away by Himalayan wolves. That is so heartbreaking. Because here you are trying to say that a period is a dirty thing. Here you are saying that when you open, this is what happens when you open your legs. You've already demonized sex for pleasure. So when this girl gets married and she's having issues because of all these things, how do you undo that? Because we are still in a culture where we are not open to, we are still reluctant when we are asked to go for therapy.
Yeah, and that one came out of a conversation with a friend. She's South Asian, she's from Nepal, and we were kind of exchanging stories about these different cultural elements where, you're demonized for sex, where when you get your period, it's also demonized. And she told me that in her country, Nepal, girls who are on their period are not allowed to sleep inside the house. They have to sleep outside in the cowshed. And I was so, horrified. And I was also telling her about, different experiences in Africa. So we were exchanging these stories. We're like, wow, Asia and, Africa are pretty far apart, but we have these similarities, right? These stories where, young girls are being told to go sleep outside because they're on their period. So I wanted to talk about that there are these similarities across cultures where women are demonized for sex, women are demonized for periods, for their sexuality, etc.
Okay. So then the 3 short stories after that is still all about pleasing men. First one, I will start with dry. It's nothing new for us women to try something daring to keep the interest of our men. Then I go, men prefer it dry. And you go ahead to talk about these women who are going to this woman somewhere who sells, who sells something to make down there dry. And then it's what strikes me is as they walk in the direction of the city hall, they ignore the warnings of the number of women that have been diagnosed with cervical cancer in that region. And then you go to the pooling. Here where you mentioned someone and said electricity makes women idle. And then the pulling, I believe here she was pulling on the girl's labia or so, which was painful. And the story ends with the only explanation she gave me was, this is for your future husband. And then you go on to talk about Hole, a girl who was just newlywed and there was no blood on the sheet. And how the mother carried it around to disgrace the girl and tell the girl's family, your daughter is a hole. And now the parents must give the mob their daughter's head. So my question here is, it's always about women looking for ways to please the man. What are the men doing to please us?
Right, exactly. And that's the point of that story, is looking at, and I use horror, to look at, how horrifying these experiences are. And I put the title True Stories to say every element of this story comes from something true in the real world. Whether it's the story about the period, whether it's the story about, the women, and the naked women falling, whether it's a story about, saying, your hands are too soft, you're not a good woman because your hands are too soft. All of these are coming from the real world. So I wanted to show that, it feels like you're reading a horror story. It feels like you're seeing a horror movie, but it's the truth. And that's the point, that I'm shining a light on the truth that's happening, the horrific experiences of living under patriarchy.
Okay. I find it so interesting that the society is always looking for how to please men and how to make men's lives easier. I remember when I was growing up, and even till now, because I'm tall, and how people say to me that, Louisa, you have an intimidating aura. So for people who don't know you, when you sit quietly, you are not approachable. It's not easy for people to walk up to you. So something you need to do when you are addressing men, you have to humble yourself,
Right.
so that they see that your size and your height does not make you what they
Intimidating.
intimidate.
Yeah.
Why should I really care what they think?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
If you choose to think what you think without walking up to me to say, hello, how are you doing? What's your name?
Right.
I can't belittle myself to make you feel better about yourself. But it's
Right.
always about what the man wants. Even when you go to churches, I mean, I'm Catholic, but I have worshipped with some of these other churches. And I remember one time in Nigeria where they were talking of prayer points for families. Women, pray for your husbands. And all the women, my husband must be successful, my this. And I thought after that he would say, men, pray for your wives.
Yeah.
Next thing was pray for your children. And then he went on. Nothing like, please, I would like anybody. Bukola, do you have anything to say? What are the men doing to impress us and to please us? Because I'm curious. I just want to know. We are the ones always, oh, as a woman, when you find out your husband is cheating, they'll say, oh, you know what, start going to the gym, start dressing well, start cooking, start trying to get his attention.
Right.
But nobody ever says that to the man with his pot belly. Nobody ever says women might prefer six packs. Do something about your belly. Nobody says that. It's always about the woman. You have bettered 4 or 5 children. Your body has paid its dues. You've gone through it all. And people still expect you to, like somebody said when we're in school, your husband wants you to remain the way you were when he met you. But when you met me, I didn't have 4, 5, 6 children.
Right.
I didn't have those stretch marks. And you have not bettered any children, but your pot belly is bigger than my belly.
Right.
So it's always about what women will do, what women should do to please men. So I come back to by the bottle, and the woman who sells lightning by the bottle. I've never heard that before. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that's another thing, another element from Zim, where there are all these rumors that if you go to a particular market or if you go to a particular forest, you're going to find an old lady that sells lightning. And if you have an enemy, you can send the lightning to that enemy. So with that story, when I'd written the story, it didn't actually have that section with the lightning.
Okay.
So, and I was, doing my master's in creative writing. So I brought it to class to workshop, and, the class was talking about the story. And then my professor at the time said, a lot of bad things are happening in the story. Why don't you end on a good note where the women are winning, where the women take revenge, right? And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So I added that section so that we can see, okay, women fighting back, women taking back their power. So that's why that mom takes the lightning by the bottle and she strikes the uncle that's been abusing the child. So I wanted to end on a moment of triumph, for the moment where women finally are winning and fighting back by the end.
Okay. Then I'm going from story to story, so that when we're giving you brief summaries of the story. So I'm going to jump to Water Bites Back. And so this here, my understanding is this is a battle between two worlds. And you spoke about the Unjuzus here. And you said there is a pact made long ago between the Unjuzu nation and our people, long before the whites colonized this land. Long before our people forgot to respect both the spirit world and the natural world, and the beings that live in between the two. Long before our leaders forgot the blood pact we made with the Ndlovu nation. This dam of yours is a betrayal of that treaty. So talk to us about this story, because initially I wasn't sure what it was. I wasn't sure what it was. And he said, let me see. Then you hired those white workers that thought they knew everything and had no respect for the water. No matter how sharp your teeth are, you cannot bite water. Water bites back. Talk to us about this, because we have these things happening in Benin City, where I did my high school. We used to have this river then, River Ovia, and there'll be a time when it starts to take when they say the river is hungry and it starts to take lives, there'll be lots of accidents. There was a time when there were always accidents, and they said that it is because that bridge was built at the entrance to the kingdom below. So they had to go and offer sacrifices. They will tell you that when these Lebanese engineers come and Chinese engineers come, they go to appease the gods of the water before they start any work there. So I was surprised too that in Zimbabwe you had something similar. So please talk about that.
Yeah, so that story came from, there was a project to build a dam, back home. And, they were saying, oh, we're going to have, hydroelectric electricity. It's going to help with the power cuts. But then they were building it at a place where it's considered a sacred lake.
Okay.
So it felt very, disrespectful of that space. And then what happened is that the workers there thought they saw something in the water. And so they went on strike and they said, okay, we're seeing something in the water. That's a sign that we shouldn't be doing this project. But because it was an international project that was being, funded by, the Chinese government, and there were also white workers there, they just fired all the Africans and they replaced them with Chinese and white workers.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about that. That kind of, we're not, you know, respecting these sacred spaces anymore. And it's like, oh, this is just, backwards thinking. But I think, we should respect these these spaces. I think we had a relationship with the natural world where, we respected the environment, we respected the animals around us, the water. And I think there's something there that, we shouldn't just dismiss it at, oh, this is just stupid, superstitions. I think we need to investigate this stuff a little bit more and understand why for centuries did Africans respect these spaces. It's not just that, our ancestors were stupid or something like that. I think there's something there. And we shouldn't be quick to dismiss it and fire all the African workers and replace them with Chinese workers. There's something there, I think.
Yeah, very true. Okay. So the next I want to go to the soul would have no window. Nom Kubulwane, the power of shape shifting. I've heard stories of shape shifting, but the stories of shape shifting I've heard is usually at festivals where they will tell you that people will come, they'll turn into leopards, they'll turn into elephants, but purely for entertainment. And then the only other time I heard of it was when they were chasing a thief. And they said the thief arrived at a tree and disappeared into the tree. And one of the people chasing, it was my father that told me that story. And that one of the people chasing the thief turned into ants and entered the tree to go catch the thief. But here you talk about Gogo being a shapeshifter. But how come, even despite her shape-shifting skills, yes, I agree that she fell in love with a human and she lost her powers. And the only power that was left, she said, I was stripped of my immortality, stripped of my powers. And I mean, she was able to use her shape-shifting power to get arms. But even at that, they still lost to the British. I know that they fought. Yeah, they fought. But in the end, they had to wait to get their independence. They still had to fight for independence. So talk to us about shape-shifting here.
Yeah, so that story is based off of an indigenous goddess, back home. And I was really fascinated by stories of her. So I wanted to have a story that dealt with that god.
Okay.
And I wanted to talk about Zimbabwe's history as well. Before, when we were colonized by the British, it was, Southern Rhodesia, and we had to, fight for our independence from the British. So using fantasy and speculative fiction and this god to talk about that process of fighting for our freedom, and then having, the granddaughter in the story as well. And she's kind of inherited this legacy, right, of magic and resistance.
Okay. I think your story, Three Deaths and the Ocean of Time, has the most beautiful sentences in here. Yeah, I think this story, because so there are some sentences here. Sometimes what ails us cannot be explained by Western medicine. Perhaps science fiction, perhaps African science holds the answers you seek. So then another sentence, sometimes what troubles us is something ancient, something forgotten. So how do I cure something ancient and forgotten? I said, punctuating the words with air quotes and an eye roll. She tore out the page and handed it to me by remembering it. So because I was wondering here, why did this ancestor keep coming back to her? How was she going to resolve this? And then we see her going back in time to meet her ancestor, who she looked like. You know how sometimes they will tell you that sometimes some children look like, so I have a lot of gray hair. In fact, I'm all gray. And I remember my grandmom saying to me that her mother had a patch of gray. And I also came with a patch of gray. Yeah. And you know how things are passed through time. And when the woman said they were looking for her husband, I felt the colonizer had killed him. That was what I felt. Yes, I felt they had killed him because she went there, and then, you know, when they spoke about the 3 deaths, the actual deaths, how you remain in people's memories, and then absorption. That's the 3 deaths. Talk to us about this. Yeah, but this story, there's just something about this story that I think it's the words and how you crafted the words.
Thank you so much. So with that story, it came out of, my frustrations with the way history is taught back home, because with history, they always talk about the men, right? Oh, it's the men that fought for liberation. Oh, it's them that did this. But there are a lot of women that contributed for us to getting our independence from the British. And one of them is Queen Lozike, who was a queen, Ndebele queen that helped. But she's been written out of history. Our history books, they don't mention her at all. But she was actually the first person to rebel against the British in Zimbabwe. But how come we don't talk about this woman? How come she's not taught in our history books that it was actually a woman that was the first person, to rebel against the British? And that's so inspiring. I feel like she should be in the history books, but they don't talk about this woman. So I wanted to use that story to kind of bring her story to light, so we can kind of preserve the contributions that she did in this story.
Yeah, when I was doing my research on African kings and queens, I came across something like that, where that said that a lot of times, a lot of these heroes, some of them were actually women.
Right.
Because at that time, women were not expected to take up those kind of spaces. The stories were told as men, and those women were represented as men. Because if I think of the Amazons of Dahomey, yes, I had actually read that the very first set of female warriors we had were actually these women in Algeria. Yeah, that's where they were. Yeah, in Algeria. But I searched and searched. There is no story about them. You just bits and pieces about them. Just So many times when it was women, all those stories were buried. But if it's men, everybody will come out and talk about it. Oh yes, men did this, men did this, men did this. Okay. So I think we've successfully gone through a lot of the stories, but I think that let me come to when death comes to find you. The Kimberley process and so on. When I did my master's, I hold that close to my heart because artisanal mining and all of that, I studied about it. Yeah. The Groot slang. You mentioned the Groot slang, and then when I was reading it, I realized that it was actually a creature that had the head of an elephant and then the body of a snake. And you said that was how God broke it into 2 animals. That's how snakes and elephants came. I thought that was a very odd combination.
Yeah, a terrifying combination.
Yeah. And then the others that were killed, so you started from this ancient history, then you brought it into our time by talking about the meteorite that killed the dinosaurs, that killed all her sisters. And then the poverty of the artisanal miners. That man who found that diamond, and then as he found it, he was shot between the eyes. And then the suffering still continued in the afterlife. The only time I hear of suffering continuing in the afterlife is when you don't fulfill your purpose on earth. Yes, they say when you get greedy and you don't fulfill your purpose. For example, everybody isn't created to be a king. So when you start fighting for the position of a king and you lose your life in that process, you go and continue to suffer in the afterlife because you were greedy. But these men here, I now realize that somehow you brought back characters from different stories, and they all met in this afterlife where they were still farming and creating diamonds. And then you went up to the Kimberley process, and then that politician that went to speak used to be a miner himself, an artisanal miner. He used to be a Makorokoza.
Yeah.
Unlike others, he managed to crawl out of the debts. So why is he still trying to keep people in that situation, that poverty? Talk to us about the corruption, because here, this is all corruption I see.
Yeah, this is all corruption. And you're exactly right that, a lot of the politicians that we have, they also started off as, the poor guy, the little guy. But once you get that power, right, they start doing the same things. They start oppressing other people, right? So I wanted to talk about that aspect of our politics. But then, a lot of my stories kind of start with the what if question, right? Like, and I kind of come up with a crazy scenario. So I was always wondering, what if, we always say, oh, when you die, you're in a better place. But what if that wasn't the truth? This world that we live in has a lot of injustices where we have, the little guys, the poor people are always, oppressed by these big politicians, by these rich people. So what if that continues in the afterlife? So that's how a lot of my stories start. And then I kind of start crafting the world. So with that one, I was thinking, okay, what if they have to continue doing the same thing? They have to continue laboring. They're still, oppressed in the afterlife. And I kind of went crazy from there, coming up with different scenarios of what if the afterlife is actually just as unjust as our world here.
Okay, so then why flood the earth with ghosts?
They're rebelling now.
Yeah, because you said it here.
Yeah, so the ghosts
ghosts
are rebelling.
I'm wondering why flood the earth with ghosts? Now you now have things moving around your house and you're wondering what's going on here. Yeah, okay, so they are rebelling. Okay, so the very last story here was when you are drinking from graveyard wells, where you got the actual title of the book. So when I started reading about these houses vanishing, I wasn't sure initially what was going on. And you brought in religion. You know how they say, oh, Lola, please ask your question. Lola's hand is up.
Okay. I think for me, just from the little part, because I haven't read the whole book, so my apologies for that. But the beginning is what I wanted to go back to for a little bit. The symbolism of the red cloth, is this something that still happens in Zim, or is that like just fictional?
Yeah, that's definitely a part of funerals. So in your neighborhood, when you experience, a death in your house, you put that red cloth so that everybody in the community knows that you've suffered a loss. So the whole community comes together to come and visit you, to come give you food, to come, just sit with you. So it's just a signal to everybody that, oh, okay, somebody has passed away here, and it's time for the community to come and comfort that family.
Okay. And so it can be just anybody that walks in to comfort them?
Yeah. And people back home, everybody knows the neighbors, everyone knows each other. So it's, kind of like an open door policy because you already know everyone in the community.
Okay. All right. I like how you wrote the first part too, like in her voice of she's dead, but she's still observing all these things. It's a little bit creepy, but it also kind of gives a different kind of vibe. So it's good. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So here where all of them started to disappear. And initially I wasn't sure. And then it got me when I got to the part where he said every day a house disappears in Hopley. 197, 1984. Then I went, 1979, 1984. And then you spoke about the government. Oh, Laide, please ask your question.
Yeah, sorry. It's just a follow-up to the last question. So the funeral, so thanks for your book and introducing us to, well, me personally, to another African culture. But my question following up to the last is, the red cloth left outside historically was said to also disguise, used as a disguise to hold meetings, right? If I'm correct, it's been a while I read the book.
Yeah.
Meetings of rebellion against the colonizers, was it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Am I right? That funeral, like there were fake funerals held just to have meetings, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Does anything like that still happen?
Mm. Yeah, no, so
Like,
that
do we have
happened.
two things doing that? Okay. Go ahead, please.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow, I'm losing connection.
Yeah, so before we gained our independence, we had a system similar to apartheid in South Africa, where we had a white minority government ruling. And so they were afraid of rebellion, and they said you couldn't have groups of more than, 5 to 10, Black people meeting together, because they were afraid that you'd, come together and plan a rebellion. So the only way you could gather was at a wedding and at a funeral. Those are the only two places you could gather in more than groups of 5 to 10 people. So what the African soldiers started doing is that they would use funerals and weddings as a cover to plan, rebellions, to plan how they were going to take down the white minority government. So that's also part of the history where funerals were being used to plan these rebellions.
Okay, thank you.
So do we still have any kind of, sorry, Louisa, do we still have anything like that being used as a, disguise for something else? For example, even for the government, like I know that most African countries are the same. Like you still have corrupted leaders. You've talked about that. You talked about the wealth disparity, just like in every other African nation. Do you still have anything like that?
I wish we
Like,
did.
or is it just buried and it's yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Right, because look what's happening in Kenya right now. We have all these protests where the young people are trying to, fight for our rights. So I wish more stuff like that, like what's happening in Kenya, would happen in other
Yes.
African countries. So I wish it does happen.
Because everything is really going to rely on the youth and how and this is for all African countries, and how they're going to rebel against the current leaders all over Africa, because they're dwelling in it. They're passing on the generational wealth, which is, it's a national cake. It belongs to everyone, but it's the same set of people recycling it and passing it down to their children. It's so unfortunate. Thanks for teaching us that. And then another question I had was regarding the bride price there. So is that still a custom?
Yeah, bride price.
In today's world, some people are still paying expecting bride price to be paid in installments. Like you're making it so unaffordable that people have to make a payment plan. And if somebody dies, if the woman dies, there are still people waiting to collect it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's still a big thing. Lobola is a very, very big thing back home. And, it feels like if you don't get Lobola, you're a useless woman, right? So it's still a very big thing.
I was in Zimbabwe last year.
Yeah, you were, Lola, that's true. You were in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, but I didn't know about the part. They did offer us, because my cousin is the one marrying the Zimbabwean girl. They did offer us to pay in installments, but I didn't know that if something happened that they would still collect. But we obviously we paid in full, but it was just interesting that first of all they would offer installments, and then to hear you say even afterwards, God forbid something happened, they would still collect all of that. That is so ridiculous.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, Lola, I was almost in Zimbabwe, almost, never, almost. Yeah? But when I was a teenager, or even prior to that, my dad was in the army, and I don't know if you're aware, our author is Yvette, right? That Zimbabwe trained a lot of Nigerian military. Are you aware of that?
No, I didn't know
yeah, back in the 80s. So well, anyways. It's a beautiful country. Harare was where my dad was born. Well, anyway, thanks for your book. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great to know about that history. I'll look into that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So When you got here, so I started to, I made the connection with the years instead of rather than the house numbers when the houses started to disappear in 73, 96, 1967. And then when you said the government and the Chinese workers came, that's when it dawned on me that, oh, gentrification is what was going on here. Yeah. So when I walked past his house, that's when Senzi, when his house disappeared. When I walk past his house, I see people who don't live in Hopely gathered around where this house used to be. They are government officials accompanied by surveyors in white helmets and investors from China. They map out the area and take photographs. It's as if they can't even see us. You know, it's so sad how they go to these poor neighborhoods, get rid of everybody there, push them further into the slums, and then build luxury buildings. I've lived in places like that where after I left, it was gentrified. And my question always goes, so those people kicked out of there, where are they now? Where did they move to? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that story, I wanted to talk about that, what you just mentioned, that a lot of what's happening right now is that they're selling the land to Chinese companies. So they come, they clear the whole neighborhood, they chase people away from their farms, and then they sell that land to Chinese companies to, build these big projects, right? Luxury apartments, whatever it is, they clear people and then they take the land. And I wanted to talk about that form of gentrification that's happening in many African countries, and thinking, okay, well, what happens to those people? And I don't have an answer in the story. I don't answer it for you. And I'm thinking, as a reader, think about where could they possibly happen. Maybe they're immigrating to other countries. Maybe that's what's happening with the houses, or maybe they're going to a better place. I don't know. Where did you think the people were going as you were reading the story?
Initially, as I was reading, I wasn't sure. And then when I got to the end and it dawned on me that it's gentrification that was taking place, maybe they are paying these people off just to disappear. You know how sad it is. Sometimes a person might be earning, the thing with the poor and the poor state of mind. You would find people working in a place like in Nigeria back in the day where you earn 15,000. And you are earning 15,000 and maybe your employer gives you free accommodation and feeds you. These people leave these jobs to go work elsewhere where they are paid 15,500, where there is no accommodation and there's no feeding. So the mentality there is, I'm being paid 15,500, but you forget that it comes with you paying for your accommodation and paying for your transportation and your feeding. So I just felt maybe these people were being paid off or even being just chased out of the place. And I felt, it was so ridiculous that, and I wasn't surprised that her mother paid the pastor with her examination money. Yeah, how religion too comes into play, because you look at it, a lot of if people tell you that Africa is the poverty capital of the world, but I think we have the biggest churches in Africa. So what is happening?
Right, and a lot of these churches are corrupt, and that's what I wanted to have that character with the pastor, because they're kind of preying on desperate people, right? People are very desperate, and then you have these pastors that say, "Oh, if you give us money, you'll get." There's a pastor that's selling land in heaven that I learned about recently, and you're preying on desperate people, and that's not good. So I wanted to talk about those pastors that are preying on desperate people, where they're giving you your money at the hopes of buying land in heaven, or they say, "Oh, you're going to get miracle money when you give us, your money for tithes," and they're preying on desperate, hopeless people.
What's his name says, religion is the opium of the poor. Yeah, Laide, you wanted to ask a question. Oh, I thought I saw your hand up.
No, yes, it was. I was just, you guys moved on from that. I was just gonna add that in Ottawa, there's a very old apartment building, and I know that building. I have a couple of patients there. That people were, as of today, they are being forced out, like given a few weeks notice to move out of that building, and they're offering them $5,000 to break their lease, or move back after the renovation at an incredibly higher increase. So when you were talking about where do these people go, like this is a question that can be thrown anywhere, literally anywhere all over the world. Like in Ottawa this morning, people have woken up and people that are paying $1,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. Hello? Did I lose connection?
Oh,
Are now
yeah,
looking at,
go ahead.
okay, sorry. So they're now looking at paying $1,900 a month, just because the building was sold.
Yay.
Sold, new owners, new interest rates, whatever. So we can talk about displacement and gentrification, like the original occupant out to gentrify the place. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not like let's send the poor away. Like you can really make it on. Anyways, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Right. It's happening all over the world. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the harsh reality. It's so sad, but it's like if yes, Bukola, I see your hand up.
I'll just briefly touch on, it's definitely happening all around the world, and I'll briefly touch on how it's happening in the UK as well. So, of course, we all know that London is a small island. Well, the UK itself is small. London is tiny, but it's concentrated, and everybody wants to work there because, it's close to the opportunities. But with the way gentrification is going out, it's the same thing where people are sent outside of London, especially if they're people on benefits that the government is actually helping them. Because we have a very good benefit system here, so they could be getting housing accommodation as part of their support from the government. But when the council then decides, actually, we want to sell this building, they can't afford anywhere within London. So they send them completely out. And I'm talking about sending them to places where they've got no family, to places completely remote outside of London. And I don't know if you heard, a few years ago, we had something called the Grenfell Tower that got burnt. So the anniversary of Grenfell was a couple of weeks ago. This is a tall building owned by a council, very tall building that had issues and it wasn't dealt with. And then a fire broke out and fire safety was very bad. So when the fire broke out, it just escalated at a very right, and 72 people died. But apart from 72 people died, I'm talking about a high rise that had probably almost 1,000 people living in it. So when when they say that, those are the documented people. In fact, and a lot of people saying that it is a crime on Black and brown people, because if that building, whatever building was housed by white people, they would have dealt with some of the Grenfell. So I'll type it in, Grenfell. So if it was something if it wasn't that it was mainly Black people, Asians, a lot of Asians, a lot of people that were on benefits, were the people living in that building. That's why they didn't pay attention to it. But I guess in addition to the fact that people died, as bad as that was, the biggest things are when this whole high rise was raised to the floor and people couldn't live in there anymore. What the government did was that they said, okay, let's rehouse all these people. And they took all of them outside of London. People have children in schools nearby, and they're like, oh, the only place we can take these people is, let me just use, for example, Leeds. Just completely outside, forgetting the fact that, apart from the fact that, okay, yes, you're providing them accommodation, this has been home for them for so long. So they have schools, they have family members, they have churches, they have communities, but you're just displacing them. So yeah, I said I was going to keep it short, but it's such a, so where do these people go during justification? They just put them anywhere. That's just anywhere that works.
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I remember that being on the news some years ago. It's really, really terrible and tragic. I didn't know that was the aftermath, that they were moved outside of the city.
Yeah, this is so sad. People they don't really seem to care what happens to the poor. They view them like cockroaches and feel that you can get rid of them whenever you want to, and then you can get them and use them when you want to. Yeah, very sad. Anyway, Yvette, this is what, an hour, 10 minutes already. I just want to say a very big thank you for making our time to join us today. Yvette, thank you very, very much. Are you working on anything new?
Princess. Yeah, I am. And thank you so much for inviting me. This was such a great time. I am working on something new. One of the questions that you asked is, what should happen? Should we, have a revolution? We talked about what's happening in Kenya. So my next book is about that. So the young people taking back the power from the current, regime in Zimbabwe. So it's going to have magic. It's going to have, all the things similar to drinking from graveyard wells, but it's young people starting another revolution. And I think we need a second revolution in African countries where we get rid of these, terrible leaders. So that's what the book is about.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think we need to get rid of the terrible leaders so that we can have some peace and our narrative and stories can change and we don't have colonizers coming to us as investors.
Right, exactly.
Disguise of investors, yeah. So I would like to say a very big thank you to you. When your next book comes out, I'll be in touch. Thank you to your publishers too for sending us copies. Yes, and what's her name, Meredith? Yes, please give her my kindest regards. Yeah, so thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
Yvette.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.